featured this insane headliner. Afrikaner Group makes a short ride to Europe to campaign for more support against SA race laws. Imagine going to the same people who colonized and obliterated Africa, just like your ancestors. And you're like, help us.
So you want to tell us that in 1488, when Bartholomew Dias arrived here, it was no man's land. In 1652, when those guys, Jan van Riebeeck, arrived here, it was no man's land. That's sheer insanity and...
For those that have ears, listen. There is a reason why organizations, why individuals are actually selling you fear and paranoia. And it's not the reason you think. They're not out to protect your interests.
Mashia, politically incorrect. Let's talk about charities. A lot of people have been complaining over the years. We are talking Spaza Shop now. If it's foreigners, this organization always comes in, and I spoke to Ntantla Lax about this. Helen Suzman Foundation. He's got a foundation. A lot of people have foundations. For over many years, people have been saying the fear of this organization is regime change, and of course, siphoning money and washing money. These allegations have always been there. So before we even go further, listen to this, what they are doing in the US. And I think if anyone needs to pay anyone in a foundation, maybe just check these things. I mean, just check them.
So most reputable charities will publish their financial statements and annual reports online. Look for them, review them, and ask yourself, is this charity spending a reasonable percentage, at least 75%, on its mission? If the answer is no and it's going to all the employees and, other stuff, maybe expenses, what have you, then maybe that might not be the best way to spend your money, and you might want to do some additional research. So just see how they're spending your money and if it aligns to what you believe.
So if you say, I want to donate money, but give me your financial records, they give you your banks, they give you whether it's bank statement or whatever they do, just so you see how much of the percentage of the money they receive, they spend it on. So if they spend their money on certain things that are not even fruitful, let's check Naomi Campbell. Check Naomi Campbell now, and let's come back.
Let's get into it. This week, the news broke that Naomi Campbell has been banned from being a charity trustee from, I believe, a charity that she founded called Fashion for Relief. And I couldn't believe my eyes. So there's evidence of financial misconduct at the charity that she has founded even. This charity has raised millions of pounds, and what they're saying is that a lot of the money for the charity has been used to fund the travel and the lifestyle of Naomi Campbell and other people involved in the charity. Sounds a bit like fraud to me, and she has been banned for 5 years for ever being a trustee or charity or part of a charity because of the misconduct that they found.
You see, Naomi Campbell is doing exactly what people don't want charity organizations to do. So there are charities, there are foundations, there are NGOs. In South Africa, they're talking about NGOs. So the danger with these people is, because now I'm going to AfriForum, the danger with these people is they exert fear in terms of the political one. They exert fear, and then when there's fear, they go and milk people dry. An accusation on AfriForum is exactly that AfriForum is doing this deliberately to get money. And who are the people who are saying it? Other people have been saying it. The ANC has taught us this thing of regime change coming from people who are not even politicians. Gwedema Tasha says these people who are given these responsibilities They are not even demanded to account for it, but political parties are. Let's listen to Gwede.
I have a view that I raised that on this one. I said NGOs must be registered. They must declare their source of funding. And they will be regulated like any other entity in the country. Political parties do so. We declare source of funding. We are registered. We are known. NGOs must be allowed. We cannot allow that foreign NGOs must block development in whatever disguise. They must, we're not fighting NGOs, but NGOs must do what they should do. But they can't stop development. For example, let me give you an example. NGOs say we must not touch gas, we must not touch coal, petrol, we must not touch coal. But in every other country, those commodities are doing business as normal. And therefore we are bullied in that way. And it requires us to tighten the law and say those NGOs must be registered and they must declare their...
So if you were to blame these people, you would blame them on them not telling you the truth behind it. And then what happens to the money? By the way, they are not the only ones. Even other charity organizations, other NGOs who do things, whether it's GBV, whether it's, they do the same. The allegation is always consistent. They are using these monies to do their own things. And a case in point is, and this is where I ended, a case in point is what Bianca is putting across. And Velo Bianca brings you the evidence that is in court of people making South Africa great again by making other people fearful and then benefiting financially from that fear. Listen to, let me cut here the other videos you'll see as they unpack. But all I wanted to show you is it's not only in politics, it's it's everywhere. It's everywhere. People are siphoning and they are using this thing. And even if it's unfair, let me give an example. Dan Kota will show you that these white people who go around telling the rest of African nations what they are being subjected to, it's not only a lie, but they are the ones who actually benefited, but they don't want you to know that they benefited. But let me leave it at that so you can enjoy. Listen, Eitada.
So let's talk about this case. I think it's a brilliant case, and I have been repeating this over and over again, is that the white genocide myth is for profit. It is fear for sale. And I think this case particularly highlights that in so many ways. And what people are doing, and I'm talking about right-wing organizations in South Africa, I'm talking about security firms in South Africa, I am talking about these social media grifters that are raking in donations, that are pushing this particular narrative. Now, obviously, the white genocide myth distorts the crime reality in South Africa. It also erases victims of crime and fuels division, while these people pushing the myth actually pocket the money, so they are profiting from paranoia. But let's unpack this case, and it's the case of Grantland Michael Bray's bequest to the Boerelegioen. So the first thing to highlight is that Bray was a quadriplegic. He was also diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. And he got extremely radicalized about this white genocide myth in South Africa because of online content. All right. And obviously he reached out to the Boerelegioen, who were going to allegedly protect him against this white genocide, or this impending white genocide that was going to take place in South Africa. So according to the court papers, in 2020, he met with representatives from the Boerelegioen, and he allegedly gave them 6 million rands worth of Kruger rands, but they deny that. Okay. 2021, they met with him again, and they gave him a flag and a beret, and he assumed that he was a member of the Boere Legioen. However, when you look at their manifesto, it says only for people of Boere bloed. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Also in 2021, he amended his will, okay, where he left estate, part of his estate, to the Boere Legioen. Fortunately, his siblings actually contested this because they had done homework on the Boere Legioen. They also had a huge problem with this racist narrative, and the court found, fortunately, the family trust trustees and his siblings contested this in court and said that it would be funding illegal paramilitary training and racist activities. And the court actually voided the bequest. Okay. And the Boere Legioen had to also pay the applicant's costs, legal costs. So Grantland Michael Bray passed away in March 2022. But prior to that, he actually purchased a house in Fishhook that he hadn't even seen, because he thought it would be easier for the Boere Legioen to actually extract him when this so-called white genocide happened in South Africa. He also mentioned to an employee, allegedly, that he's paying money to an organization that will exterminate black people. Yeah. But that's why I want to say, for those that have ears, listen. There is a reason why organizations, why individuals are actually selling you fear and paranoia. And it's not the reason you think. They're not out to protect your interests.
Do you want to hear something absolutely absurd? There's another Afrikaner group that alleges to have 600,000 members in it that is now turning to Europe to lobby for whatever AfriForum was trying to achieve with Donald Trump. I was minding my business, checking my emails, and then my Daily Maverick newsletter featured this insane headliner. Afrikaner group makes a short ride to Europe to campaign for more support against SA race laws. Imagine going to the same people who colonized and obliterated Africa, just like your ancestors. And you're like, help us. The Solidarity Movement is the umbrella body for a range of Afrikaans interest groups, including AfriForum and the Union Solidarity. And it includes the online news publication Moruela Media. According to its website, it represents 600,000 Afrikaner families, or 2 million individuals in South Africa. Fresh from the success of drawing the attention of US President Donald Trump's administration to the supposed plight of white South Africans, the Afrikaner group now has Europe in its sights. Quick ad break. It just feels like at this time, you might need to go. You might need to leave. You might need to think of taking up that offer when you will go to such lengths to deny the apartheid laws and the forced removals of the black and brown people of South Africa for a law that is not race-based, that's based on historic fact, accuracy, and inequality due to former race-based laws, colonization, so much more. Jacob Kleinhans, the jokes, they write themselves, the Solidarity Movement's head of international liaison, confirmed to Daily Maverick this week that its delegates would visit European countries within the next 2 months. Good luck, brother. You know these European countries, by the way. Yaku, got your name wrong even the first time, couldn't give a fuck. Yaku, do you know that these European countries are already facing so much, I'm stretching, scrutiny over housing artifacts from Africa? They're under pressure from the international community. Did you know that these guys don't even like immigrants? You're going to the same guys that are constantly trying to get rid of immigrants. And it's not just their presidents, it's the people. And I think just because you think you're white, You're the exception. Aku Small Hands, quote, retweeted News 24 and said, and we at Solidarity will now intensify our international campaign. We will not back down. By not back down, do you mean we will not leave our stolen land? We will not immigrate. We will find someone out there who's willing to break international laws for allegations that are unfounded on facts, that lack evidence, that cannot be substantiated given South Africa's history. Get the fuck out of here.
So you want to tell us that in 1488, when Bartholomew Dias arrived here, it was no man's land. In 1652, when those guys, Jan van Riebeeck, arrived here, it was no man's land. That's sheer insanity and drunkenness on hatred. So what I would like to know from you, although I don't think it's necessary, as Honorable Mampuru has alluded to, our royalty, our great-grandfathers and mothers, our kings and queens were robbed of their land. They were given mirrors. Now you tell us you negotiated. How can you negotiate with a person whom you don't even, because they didn't even understand these languages? How did you negotiate with them? So please, if you want this process or your inputs to be taken seriously, don't come here with sheer arrogance. We have been listening to you, insulting us, lambasting on us, calling us names, but you want us to take you seriously. That's sheer insanity.
The way you acted the previous months, the way you acted trying to fight for something you believe in, you will destroy yourself. Whether you like it or not, that will happen, because South Africans are fair people and they judge, and when they judge harshly.
I've heard other AfriForum meetings where you have presented, there's not been this arrogance. We are trying to build a South Africa. You are taking us back. En ek maak 'n bepleit met jou vandag dat your insults to the people here is unacceptable. We need to come together as a nation. Ek is Afrikaans sprekende. Vandag 52 jaar gelede is Hendrik Verwoerd doodgemaak in hierdie parlement. Jy weet dit, né? And we need to reach out to each other. You've heard people here that are hardening their hearts as a result of what you have said today. We've been sitting with this process for months to find a restorative justice solution. You have not commented on one clause of the Constitution. All you've done is you've attacked the ANC and the EFF. Why don't you comment on the provisions of the Constitution and be constructive so that we can take this process forward? It's exactly the same as Black Land First yesterday that attacked me as a white person. You've done the same to black people today. And so please, I would plead with you to reconsider your approach. And I'd urge you to consider your position. Thank you.
Black economic empowerment is nothing compared to white economic empowerment. And it freaks me out a little bit how many South Africans complain about BEE, or they say things like 30 years of democracy, hasn't it been enough for you? And how few South Africans know how far colonial and apartheid governments went to advantage white people. For hundreds of years. You know that talking about colonization and apartheid gets complicated because so much of it happened off the record, or maybe there's not evidence and people dispute it. So I'm going to make this super simple. All I'm going to do is tell you about a handful of government policies that were enacted on the record, no doubt, to advantage white people. White economic empowerment, it's just what it was. There's honestly too much to talk about in 3 minutes, so I'm just going to start at 1910 when the Union of South Africa was first formed. The Second South African War was fought between the Brits and the Boers, and the Brits won, but then this new country was formed and they wanted to unite all white people together. Immediately, nearly all people of color aren't allowed to vote. And then in 1913, the Land Act made it illegal for black people to own or even lease land outside of reserves. That meant 93% of the land could only be owned by white people. So who did it benefit? White farmers. Then in the early 1920s, poor white Afrikaners protested that most of big industry was owned by British companies, and those companies were hiring skilled black laborers over white laborers. In response, the government funded massive public works programs like building the Hartbeespoort Dam to create jobs for white workers. In 1924, the National Party came to power for the first time, and they immediately increased subsidies for white farmers and placed high tariffs on imported agricultural goods to give local farmers the advantage. Also in 1925, the Wage Act creates a minimum wage for white workers but not black workers, and the government offers incentives to companies who are applying for tenders. The more white people you employ, the more likely you are to get work. Let's jump forward to 1948 when the National Party returns to power and they formalize apartheid for the first time. And the first thing they did was direct massive funding towards social grants and welfare programs for poor white people and slashed funding for people of color. The state continually expanded education programs to upskill white workers while denying all of that to black people. In 1960, the apartheid state cut all funding for feeding schemes in black schools. The 1952 Urban Areas Act made it incredibly hard for black people to seek employment. In 1953, the Industrial Conciliation Act meant black people couldn't be classified as employees. They got no benefits, they couldn't unionize. In the 1950s and 60s, black people's pensions were fixed, which meant, with inflation, that those pensions were losing value. The Nats worked incredibly hard to help Afrikaner-owned business. In the 1960s, the apartheid government created African language radio stations and handed out hundreds of thousands, millions of radios to black people in townships. And then they gave advertising space to this massive new audience they'd created to Afrikaner-owned businesses. I've run out of time, but there's literally so much more like this. So before your next hot take on 30 years of democracy or BEE, exercise your reading skills.
The New Yorker, left-leaning publication, by the way, did an expose revealing that the Black Lives Matter Global Network spent $6 million on a mansion in Los Angeles, and they attempted to obscure the purchase from financial disclosure. They didn't want anybody to know that they purchased the house. Even more hilariously, Black Lives Matter themselves recently came out on Twitter, a bit of a diatribe, and they attempted to justify the purchase, saying that it was made to, quote, encourage black creativity with the property and a space for black folks to share their gifts with the world and hone their crafts as we see it. I don't even know what that means. All I know is I was not invited, and I am black, and I did not get to share with the world my gifts and my crafts in their multi-million-dollar mansion.